Hey guys, hope you guys are doing well. Let's talk about Iran. Iran right now is the focus of the media, especially when it comes to anything that's outside of the United States. Iran is the focus. And there's a lot of hysteria taking place on Twitter and on Facebook about World War III with the Iranians. And you have the liberals who are saying, look, Trump is starting a war with Iran, right? It's Bush 2.0, it's Iraq, it's 2003 all over again. And then you have the conservatives, and they're like, look, Iran just attacked our American soldiers. They just launched missiles at our U.S. air bases in Iraq. Oh my God, World War III is going to start. So there's hysteria on both sides. But here is the thing, right? And here's what nobody wants to talk about, or, there's some people talking about it, I'm sure. But this is one thing that people aren't really referencing right now. And that is that there has been a history of this between the United States and Iran taking place for quite some time now. Last night, I was, really focusing on the news coverage regarding Iran and the missile strikes and all that jazz. And Trump said, I'm going to be doing a speech and blah, blah, blah. I'm going to be addressing the nation regarding this situation and all that stuff. All that jazz, right? And I'm sitting here like, wait a second, we've seen this before. October surprise. And the moment I saw, missiles struck, missiles were launched from Iran towards these air bases in Iraq, but no Americans died. No U.S. soldiers died. Not a single soldier died. Now, when the Americans killed Mr. Soleimani, or as the Americans call him, Mr. Soleimani, I prefer to call him Soleimani because it just sounds so authentic and it just sounds so multicultural and diverse. I love it. I love the accents, right? I love feeling cultural. So when the Americans killed Mr. Soleimani, the Americans were like, yeah, go Trump, yeah, killed that guy, yeah. Under Obama, we had Benghazi. Trump, oh no, he killed Mr. Soleimani. Qasem Soleimani was killed. And the Iranians were like, our great leader Soleimani was killed by the Americans. And there was all this hysteria going on both sides. And not too long after the Americans killed Mr. Soleimani, what happened? The Iranian Revolutionary Guard said, hey, the Americans told us that we can actually retaliate. But just as long as the retaliation is proportionate to the killing of Soleimani. In other words, Iranians, you can attack us back, you can make a show of retaliation just as long as it is proportionate to what we did to you. So I don't know, you want to kill some Iraqi guy that's loyal to the United States or is an American puppet or something like that, a U.S. proxy. You want to drop some bombs. Just don't kill American soldiers, right? Just don't kill don't make it bloody, in other words, right? In fact, once I saw that the Americans killed Soleimani, what came to my mind? What came to my mind wasn't any sort of propaganda coming from Dennis Prager or Ben Shapiro or any one of these guys, Mark Levine or any of these other guys. What came to my mind? Two words, my friends, that no one ever has brought up. I have not seen anyone on the internet bring this up. Two words, October surprise. No one talks about this. Ronald Reagan, when he was running against Carter, what was happening? The Iran hostage crisis. Iran hostage crisis. Let's talk a little bit about this, guys. Iran hostage crisis. Iran hostage crisis. The Iranians, a lot of Iranians hated the Shah, right? Because the Shah was a billionaire and supposedly he was against the Ummah and he was anti-Muslim, all this jazz, right? He was getting way too close to the Americans. The Shah of Iran had cancer. The Americans said the Shah has to come to New York because the New York hospitals are the best in the world and he can't get medicated in Mexico properly. He has to come to New York. Now, the Shah's private doctor doubted all of this, but, I don't think the Shah had much of a choice. The Americans brought the Shah to New York. What happened? The crazy nationalist Islamic militants in Iran, and not all of them were Islamists, by the way. Some of these guys were just hardcore Iranian nationalists. There's a lot of nationalism in Iran. It's not all just puritanical Islamism. So these militants in Iran were like, hey, look, the Shah went to New York. He's with the Americans. He's colluding with the Americans. You had a riot in Tehran. They took these Americans as hostage in the U.S. Embassy. The Americans knew that by bringing the Shah over, they would trigger a U.S. Embassy hostage crisis. Yes, that is right. They knew exactly what would happen. Jimmy Carter, in fact, said, what are you going to do when they take over the embassy? He said this before the Shah came to New York, which is why he was a little bit hesitant in allowing the Shah from coming to New York. But who backed the Shah coming to New York? John J. McCloy and all the rest of these goon squads from the Chase Bank, Rockefeller Chase Bank. So you have all of these big multinational entities and these politicians involved, the officials involved. You have the whole Ronald Reagan campaign goon squad. You have John J. McCloy. You got all these people who were involved in working together to cause some sort of a, well, not really working together, but they were, for the most, the consequence of their actions was a strategy of tension. You had the embassy situation. Ronald Reagan and his campaign squad take advantage of this whole thing. They capitalize on this whole thing. What happened? They said, oh, look, the Iranians, look, they have our boys. Carter's not doing this right. Iran was negotiating with the Carter administration. The Iranians would make it look like they were agreeing with Carter, and then they would change their minds all of a sudden. Was this a coincidence? I think not. Because when you look into this, when you look into the work of Mr. Adi Ben Menashe and all the people and people like him who have actually discussed this, Gary Sick and other journalists, who've actually discussed this whole thing about the Iran hostage crisis and all the BS that was taking place behind the curtains, what you'll find out is that there was collusion between the Reagan administration and the Iranians. And then they made an agreement, the Americans and the Iranians and the Israelis together made an agreement. The Iranians would not release the hostages until after Reagan would win. Now, amazingly, they knew that Reagan would win, which really goes to show you that these elections in America, the people, the powers that be, they know the results, right? They know this guy's going to win. It's why you see all these lousy candidates in the Democrat Party right now, because they know none of them are going to win, because the Democrats don't want a Democrat president right now. They want Trump to win again. They want their 4 years of a Republican. They want that. So then after the 4 years, they can say, oh, look how much Trump has screwed up. Look how much mess this guy has caused. That's why, and then they're gonna push some guy you never heard of before to be the Democrat candidate, and he's gonna be charismatic, white, most likely from Silicon Valley or has ties to Silicon Valley, some sort of a eugenist, the whole thing. You're gonna see some neoliberal nationalist become the Democrat president. Maybe not immediately after Trump. Maybe you'll have in there a Republican, but eventually you're going to have this sort of thing. So, as I was saying, they said, okay, Iranians, you can release the hostages, but don't do so until after the election. Once that is done, the deal is sealed, and we will now have arms deals with you guys. The Americans will then sell weapons to the Iranians. The Israelis will then sell weapons to the Iranians. The Iranians will have this huge arsenal of weapons so they can screw the Iraqis in war, and that's exactly what happened. So it was a money deal. It was a money deal. But nobody ever brings this up. No one ever talks about this because you know why? Because Americans, for the most part, do not... Oh, my goodness. I have these... I have my... I'm growing chili peppers. I do this every year now. During the month of January, I start growing my peppers in my room so that way when March or April comes, I plant my peppers and they're ready to go. That's why I have free peppers from my garden every year. You guys should garden. Garden! If you don't garden, I'm telling you right now, you're really missing out on some of the joys of life. But as I was saying, Americans do not really have... A lot of Americans, when it comes to politics, do not have an awareness of patterns of behavior. When I look at certain things that happen in regarding U.S. foreign policy, and you can even do this with domestic policy as well, you can compare it to things in the past. So, for example, right-wingers and Republicans talking about deporting Mexicans or deporting illegal immigrants. Oh, really? This happened before, guys. Back in the 1930s, this happened. The U.S. government deported a whole bunch of Mexicans. I think 1 million Mexicans were deported in the 1930s, many of whom were American citizens. Well, we didn't give a damn because we just wanted to appeal to all the racist people, all of the racists like Gerald Ford and the rest of them who just, they didn't like brown folks. That's the reality. Or like Republicans talking about immigration, dangers of immigration. Well, let's go back to 1924 immigration law. Who was behind that? Republicans were. So Republicans have a huge history of this. So once you understand patterns of behavior, you can kind of anticipate what is going to happen next. Most people don't do this because most people do not have an awareness of patterns of behavior, which is why so many people in America have daughters who marry losers because they ignore patterns of behavior. Well, yeah, he had a bad past. Yeah, he was a drunk back in the day, but don't worry about it. I'll fix him. Or, he fixed himself. He's reformed now. Goes right back to the same damn thing. And you have a single mom who talks about finding love in her future. I am right. God is going to give me the right man in my life. How many times have we seen that nonsense? We've seen this about 5 gazillion times. Same thing goes with politics. In fact, I will tell you a story. I'm going to tell you a really, really funny story about this, okay? Get this. You guys like this story. This is a little anecdotal story coming from Theodore. All right? So years and years and years and years ago, I knew a girl, all right? This was back in 2014. I was dating this girl, and she was interested in me meeting her family, right? This was years and years ago, okay? And she had this cousin that she wanted me to meet. And she said, I really want you to meet my cousin. And I said, okay. And she's like, yeah, I want you to meet this specific cousin. She didn't want me to meet any of her cousins. She just wanted me to meet this one cousin of hers. So I said, okay, fine. She said, yeah, I really want you to meet this cousin because this is the only relative that I have that's somewhat normal. He's the only decent guy in my realm of relatives, cousins, aunts, uncles, the whole damn thing, right? So I said, okay, fine. So we drive to this guy's house, and this cousin of hers is living with his grandparents, there's no shame in living with grandma and grandpa, okay? Just as long as you're not like, an 8 Mile or anything like that. So we go to this guy's house, and he's with his grandparents, right? So I'm sitting there in the car, and this guy walks to the car, he comes inside, he sits in the front seat. As soon as I take a look at this guy, I knew trouble. So he didn't have his shirt off, but I was told by the girl that I was seeing's mom, I was told by her mother that he has a tattoo of Hitler on his chest and a tattoo of Joseph Stalin on his back. So this guy was a double opportunist, and he was so far into reactionary ideology, he just said, to hell with it, I'll love both Hitler and Stalin because, hey, they were both killers. And he was actually serving time in prison, and he was getting in fights with the black inmates because he had that tattoo of Hitler. Yeah, let's talk about your normal cousin, lady. So we're in the car, and this guy starts going off about religion. And I'm sitting there with this guy. This guy looks like something from America History X. And he's sitting there talking about how much he hates Christianity. No surprise to me, you have a tattoo of Hitler on your body. I'm not expecting you to be exactly a Starbucks evangelical. So he is going off about how much he hates religion, he hates Christianity, and he says, F Christianity, F this, and F that, and F this. And me and him get into an argument. I out-intellectualize him on the history of the Crusades. He gets upset, says F Christianity, F religion, F this, F that. When the girl's mom stops at the red light, he gets out of the car and walks off in the middle of the road. The girl that I was seeing starts crying, and I'm like, why are you crying? And she says, I've never seen him like this. I thought he was normal. I'm like, if this is the most normal relative you have, God help me when I meet the rest of your family. What was wrong here? Patterns of behavior. If a guy has a tattoo of Hitler on his body, he is not normal. If he has a tattoo of Stalin on his body, he is not normal. Patterns of behavior. They are patterns of behavior. The guy served time in prison. He was a racist. Patterns of behavior. He's the most normal cousin I have. Apparently, you don't have a single damn clue about being aware of something called patterns of behavior. So let's talk about American foreign policy. America had this arms deal with Iran, and they used the hostage situation for 2 things. 1, to make a deal with Iran, You release the hostages, we give you arms. Second, to boost the image of Ronald Reagan and to humiliate poor Jimmy Carter. All right, so now that we understand that, let's fast forward to the year 2020. Mr. Qasem Soleimani is killed by the Americans. What nobody ever talked about regarding Soleimani was that he was a part of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. And of course, people mentioned that. But what no one mentioned was the fact that the radicals, or the hardliners in the camp of Soleimani, really didn't like the Rouhanis of the Iranian government. Rouhani is the prime minister of Iran. Now, Rouhani, and this is what people aren't talking about, Rouhani was elected. A lot of Iranian people voted for Rouhani because they didn't like the hardliners like Mr. Ahmadinejad, or as the Iranians call them, Ahmadinejad. So Mr. Ahmadinejad was saying death to America and death to Israel. There were all these sanctions that were being imposed on the Iranians, right? All these sanctions. How does my shirt look here? All right. All these sanctions were being imposed on Iran because of Ahmadinejad. Okay, I can understand putting sanctions on Iran because of Ahmadinejad. He was, nonetheless, after all, screaming death to America and death to Israel and all this stuff. Okay, fine. Now, I don't really agree with putting sanctions. I can understand why people would agree on imposing sanctions, but I don't think sanctions are really ever a good idea. I really don't. I don't think sanctions are a great idea. You know why? Because what sanctions do is they isolate a country and they justify certain nationalistic and hardline suspicions about the country that is imposing the sanctions. They will say, this country really, really hates us. This country is trying to destroy our economy. This country is trying to ruin our dignity. That country starts imposing sanctions. You have just fulfilled that narrative. Oh my goodness, guys. Not a good idea. So, and then another thing also, once you fulfill those suspicions, then the hardliners now have more of a leverage in the propaganda scheme. Oh, look, these hardliners were right. This country is putting sanctions on us. This country is ruining our economy. So you've just justified their beliefs, and you have now made their arguments look legitimate. And that country falls deeper and deeper into radicalization. What we need to do with Iran is integrate them into the international scene, allow them to make business deals with the United States, Germany, and other Western countries, NATO countries, and to push them into the international world, thereby modernizing Iran, and thereby convincing the millennials and other youths of Iran that, hey, look, the Western world doesn't hate us, and look, they have some really cool things like music and video games and all that stuff. Because here's the thing about Iranians, especially Iranian youth, that not a lot of people are talking about. Most of them don't give a damn about religion. But what we have done, what have we done as a country? What have we done as the Western world? We have imposed these people with sanctions. We have ruined their economy. We have caused their real to free fall and become completely vacuous of value. We have diminished their economy. What has that done? It has legitimized the narrative of the hardliners. This is not a good idea. It's a terrible idea. You have pushed Iran further and further into isolation, forcing it with no other choice but to side with other countries that have been pushed off to the fringes, like China, North Korea, and Russia. They have no other choice. This is a globalized world. Countries live off of imports and exports. How the hell else are we going to survive as a country? We have to have imports and exports. America has imports and exports. Every NATO country lives off of imports and exports. Turkey has huge business dealings with the European Union. The biggest buyer of Turkish goods is the EU. What would happen if we isolated Turkey and pushed it off? You would have a lot of difficulty. You would further radicalize that country. We're helping Turkey, even though Turkey is actually a lot more dangerous than Iran. We have armed that country to the teeth, even though that country is a lot more dangerous than Iran. Now here's the thing. We have completely ruined Iran. Not completely, but we have ruined Iran's economy. We have ruined that country's dignity. Now, you have people who will sit there and go off about, I don't know, they'll talk about how we can't reason with the Iranians. How can you make that argument? How can you honestly make that point when the reality is that the Iranians had no problem negotiating with the U.S. government during the Obama administration. That's one of the reasons why Rouhani won, because a lot of Iranians wanted Iran to be integrated into the international scene. They wanted Iran to be integrated into the international community. They did not want radicals like Ahmadinejad to isolate Iran further, thereby justifying sanctions coming in from the Western world. And so Rouhani, he ran, his campaign was being marketed as a campaign for peace. Rouhani was arguing for the Iran deal. Rouhani was saying, listen, if we can get this Iran deal, we can have peace. We can prevent war with the United States and prevent war with Israel. We can prevent intervention from the United States and Israel by having this deal. He sold the Iran deal to the Iranian people on this argument, on this apologetic. And Rouhani's apologia was all about preventing war with the U.S. and Israel. But yet, we had people in the United States media going off about how, what? We can't reason with the Iranians. The Iranians are incapable of reason. They're incapable of actually negotiating peace. So let's talk about that. There's actually a video. Oh my goodness. Okay, hold on. There's a video that I saw yesterday. I really want to show this to you guys, okay? Hold on a second. Here, let me see if I can find it. Jonathan. There was this guy, Jonathan Hohenhig. Here. I saw this yesterday. Check this out, okay? This came up on Fox News yesterday. Look at this. Hold on. Look at what this lunatic says. Jonathan Hohenhig. Okay, he's some capitalist guy. Well, okay, I don't have an issue with capitalism as long as it's moderated, not like, allowing super rich conglomerates and industrialists to screw over poor people. But this guy is like a hardcore capitalist. I think, he's also a hardcore libertarian, which is like, you're like a few hair inches away from Hitler at that point. But this guy's going off about how the Iranians cannot be reasoned with. Look what he says.
To Iran, but the fact that they're up against the wall, the fact, as you said, that their economy is in shambles thanks to the president's maximum pressure campaign. Unfortunately, this is not a society, or certainly not an administration in Iran that deals with reason. These people are the ones who, strap suicide bombs to their own citizens.
Jonathan, I would argue with you a little bit. I would argue with you a little bit. These mullahs don't want to lose their position, and there is a past year when we have pushed...
Okay, so this Fox News host has some reasonable idea as to what's happening. He's like, hey, listen, the mullahs actually don't want war. What the hell are you talking about? This lunatic, freaking von Mises fanatic, Jonathan Hohenhig, is going off about how they're not capable of reason. They can't be reasoned with. If that is true, Mr. Hohenhig, then why the hell were they willing to negotiate with the Obama administration? Oh my God! I get so enraged by this. Like this lunacy. Listen, I was around these circles for a long, long time. All this, the anti-jihad, counter-jihad. Okay, listen, I'm not pro-Islam or pro-jihad. But my God, when you look at the Iranian side, yes, you have your fanatics. Yes, you have very dangerous people. Yes, you have your hardliners. But on the other side, on the American side, we also have hardliners who really don't want a negotiation, and they only want to keep intensifying sanctions, thereby destabilizing the economic condition and disposition of the country of Iran, thereby giving more political leverage to hardliners. This is not good. So listen, Mr. Qasem Soleimani, he was killed on January 3rd, right? January 3rd of 2020. Just recently, we're talking like within 24 hours, Prager University puts out this video about the Iran deal. The video is 4 years old, my friends. 4 years old, okay? So they're reviving this old video not too long after Soleimani was killed. Coincidence? I think not. So let's watch this video. Dennis Prager is criticizing the Iran deal in this video. I'm going to play you guys this video, give you my comments. All right, so let's go. Let's go, guys. All right?
We say that evil is dark, but this metaphor is imprecise. Evil is actually intensely bright, so painfully bright that people look away from it. Many even deny its existence. Why? Because once people acknowledge evil's existence, they know they have to confront it. And most people prefer not to confront evil. That is what led to World War II and the death of 55 million people. Many in the West denied the darkness of Nazism. They looked the other way when that evil could have been stopped, and then appeased it as it became stronger.
This is coming from a guy who, by the way, loves to sort of flirt with anti-immigrant figures, like anti-immigrant activists. This is coming from the guy who wrote an article saying the reason why Japan has such a low crime rate is because they don't have a lot of immigration and they don't have a lot of multiculturalism or a lot of racial diversity. They are a homogenous society, and that's the reason why they have low crime rates, which pretty much parallels the very pro-eugenist arguments that we saw in the eve of the Holocaust and the rise of the Third Reich. So all this stuff about, it's World War II, guys. Iran is Hitler. It's the Third Reich. Really? Really, guys? Let's talk about this just for 1 minute here, okay? Iran is supposedly the biggest threat to the world right now. Iran launched missiles towards American troops, right? American air bases. Not a single American soldier was killed. Not a single American soldier was killed, guys. Not one. If Iran was this huge existential threat to the United States and to America, you don't think they would kill at least one American soldier? Now, I'm glad that not a single U.S. soldier died. I'm glad nobody died in all this. But don't you think it's strange that the country that is being posed as the biggest existential threat to United States power could not kill a single civilian in these airstrikes? Even though they launched tens of missiles towards these U.S. bases, they couldn't kill one U.S. soldier. Oh, let's add this to the fact that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard said, the Americans said, go ahead and retaliate. Let's add this to the fact that a couple of hours before the Iranians launched these missiles, they let the Iraqi government know, hey, we're launching the missiles. Hey, guys. Thus giving time to the U.S. soldiers to clear the air bases? Is this not a show? Can we not at least say, hey, I suspect that this is a show, so that the Iranian government can appease the hardliners, and secondly, so that the U.S. government could boost Trump's image? Can we not at least say, hey, the U.S. government has done this before with Reagan and the October Surprise and Chase Bank and John J. McCloy and that whole thing with arms deals between the Americans, Israelis, and the Iranians? Can we not at least look back into history and parallel it with what's going on today? Hello, people? Are you guys not seeing this? You know why people can't see this? You know why? Patterns of behavior. Patterns of behavior, gentlemen. Let's watch more of this, okay?
We are reliving 1938.
We are reliving 1938, even though the Third Reich needed multiple countries to defeat it. The Third Reich was so powerful, we needed multiple countries to vanquish the Third Reich, okay? Russia, France, Great Britain, a whole bunch of other resistant fighters, a whole load of resistant fighters from France, the United States, Canada. We needed a whole bunch of countries to defeat this one government of the Third Reich. And all of a sudden, it's like, Iran's the Third Reich, even though they couldn't kill a single American troop. Even though they could not kill a single American soldier, even though we are screwing their entire economy to the point that the Iranian rial is worth nothing and is continuously free-falling. Even though we had the whole... Oh my God. Okay, I'm going to talk more about this, okay? This is not the Third Reich. Okay, can we admit something here? Can we admit something? Can we admit a simple fact here, guys? Okay, I'm saying this as a Semite. I'm saying this as an American Middle Easterner, okay? I'm saying this as an American Middle Eastern guy who has contributed to America's amazing project of multiculturalism and diversity. Can we all just agree that Middle Eastern people suck at fighting? All right? Middle Eastern people are okay when it comes to guerrilla warfare. I'll give them that. They're good in guerrilla warfare. Hey, listen, if America got rid of its bombs and got rid of its air force, did not use its air force and just put ground troops to fight against militants in, I don't know, downtown Tehran somewhere, I will admit the U.S. soldiers would have a lot of problems because they would be receiving fire from people from the streets, people from windows. It'd be very, very difficult, okay? But for the most part, Middle Eastern people are not really good in modern warfare, okay? Even Israel, all right? Even Israel, the most powerful country in the Middle East. Even Israel, for the most part, Israelis suck at fighting. They suck. They suck. They were embarrassed fighting against Hezbollah on the ground. They needed the Air Force. The only reason why Israel has power is because of the American technology. Saudi Arabia, the same thing. Saudi Arabia has a decent air force because of United States help. That's the only reason. Other than that, Middle Eastern folks, we're not really the best fighters, all right? You don't see a lot of Middle Eastern boxers, okay? You don't see a lot of Middle Eastern cage fighters. They're not warlike people. They're just not. Middle Eastern dudes would rather like drink tea and talk about, I don't know, conspiracy theories as opposed to, fighting in street warfare. That's most Middle Eastern folks, okay? They suck. Germans, very good at warfare. All right? Let's just admit that one thing. I'm willing to concede. Us Middle Eastern dudes, we're not very good fighters. All right? Let's watch more of this.
Year that democratic Western nations assured a police state, the Nazi regime, that they would do nothing to prevent its expansion. That year, the British Prime Minister never...
Hold on. I have to add something to this. Okay, guys? Hold on a second. This will be the year when we allowed this and that, and he's paralleling it to Iran. What enabled Iranian expansion in the Middle East more than the 2003 Iraq War? And do not give me this garbage that the Americans did not know that by removing Saddam, they would make a vacuum that the Iranians would want to fill up. What empowered Iran more than anything? It was the removal of Saddam Hussein, the very thing that people like Dennis Prager and Ben Shapiro were all about. That is what facilitated the rise of Iran. That's why you see so much Iranian meddling going on in Iraq. That's what all these Iraqi protests are about. What are all these protesters protesting about? What are they complaining about? Well, they're complaining about economic problems, but at the same time, they are mad about excessive Iranian meddling in their society and in their government. They have a right to be upset about that. But what sparked that more than anything? The Iraq War. Removing Saddam Hussein brought that problem. And also the fact, let's not forget, the United States supported Iranian-backed militias. I don't want to use the same word twice in a sentence. The United States supported Iranian-backed militias during the Obama administration. Israel and Reagan did arms deals with Iran. Come on, guys. Have awareness about patterns, okay?
Chamberlain went to Munich to negotiate with Adolf Hitler. He left believing Hitler's promises of peace in exchange for Germany being allowed to annex large parts of Czechoslovakia. Upon returning to England, Chamberlain announced, "Peace for our time." The 2015 agreement between America, Europe, Russia, China, and Iran mirrors 1938. The Nazi regime was a police state. The Islamic Republic of Iran is a police state.
I don't want to be pausing too much. I know it may get annoying, but I gotta add something here. You have this crazy phenomena of nationalism going on in Europe. Steve Bannon going to Europe, collaborating with different right-wing parties, Vox in Spain, crazy nationalist right-wingers in Spain under the party of Vox. Stephen Bannon collaborating with the Alternative for Deutschland party, AfD. Stephen Bannon working with the Austrian Freedom Party. Donald Trump saying Boris Johnson is great, even though Boris Johnson is a nationalist. Brexit, oh my God, Brexit, which is basically going to push Britain away from, it's going to remove Britain's power, veto power within the European Union, thereby preventing or not allowing Britain to prevent or preclude Germany's aspiration to create a pan-European military force ran by Germany. And this bastard is talking about, this is the 1930s of our time in Iran, when he has no problem with Brexit and has no problem with these crazy nationalist parties and will say things that the types of things that skinheads say, like Japan is a homogenous country, that's why they have such low crime rates. Give me a freaking break.
The Nazis' greatest aim was to exterminate the Jews of Europe. Iran's greatest aim is to exterminate the Jewish state. The West dismissed Hitler as the Jews' problem. The West dismisses Iran as Israel's problem.
And aren't right-wingers in the United States also dismissing the right-wing nationalist, racialist phenomena going on in Europe right now as Europe's decision. That's the decision of the European people. If European people want to vote for these nationalists, that's their prerogative. That's their decision. That sort of indifference is being done in regards to the rise of actual Nazis in Europe.
Nazi Germany hated the West and its freedoms. The Islamic Republic of Iran hates the West and its freedoms. Germany sought to dominate Europe. Iran seeks to dominate the Middle East and the Muslim world. And just as Britain and France appeased Nazi Germany...
Hold on. Doesn't Germany also want to further its domination in Europe? And that's why they're like, hey, Britain is leaving, Brexit is happening. Now we can do what we wanted to do for decades, something that Britain has been preventing for a long time now, and that is create a pan-European military force led by Germany. And Brexit is going to enable that? Well, let's not talk about that. Okay, hold on. I'm going to do this for the first time, okay? Hold on. I'm going to check something out here. Dennis Prager. Let's see. National. Oh, yeah. Hold on. It was Prager University that had that Zionist guy who loves nationalism. What's his name? Hold on. Clarity about nationalism. Why you should be a nationalist. PragerU. Yes. Pretty sure I saw this video. There's that Zionist. Yes.
It's national.
This guy. And he's all about European nationalism, and he's on PragerU saying this, but Prager has absolutely zero issue with this. And didn't hold on, this is for later. Didn't Prager University didn't they have that guy Owen Benjamin, who's like a Jewish Nazi, on their program? But then they got rid of him after like media broke out that he was actually a Nazi. Yeah, there's a lot of weird things about PragerU that a lot of conservatives don't want to concede to. Let's watch more of this.
Countries, along with the United States, have chosen to appease Iran. In fact, there's considerably less defense for the Iran agreement, which awards Iran $150 billion in currently frozen assets and the right to keep its nuclear program.
Hold on. What is the problem with that? Hold on. It's true that the part of the Iran deal was to give billions of dollars in frozen assets. I'm not sure if it was $150 billion. There is an article here, and it's on CNN, and before you dismiss, this CNN is fake news, a lot of media publications have been saying the same exact thing. But the U.S. Treasury Department estimated that the amount was really not $150 billion. It actually was a little more than $50 billion. Regardless of the number that you choose, be it $150 billion or $50 billion or $70 billion, the fact is that this wasn't the United States government arbitrarily just deciding to give billions of dollars to Iran. It wasn't like Obama got up and he was like, I really love Iran. This is amazing, blah, blah. I love the Iranians. I love Muslims. I hate Israel. I want to give billions of dollars of U.S. tax revenue to Iran. Okay, it wasn't like that at all. That's some crazy boomer conservative fantasy, okay? The bottom line is that those tens of billions of dollars, they were frozen they were monies that were owed to Iran from business dealings that were done by Iranians. All right? The United States did not allow those assets to go into Iran because they were putting sanctions on the Iranians. That money is owed to the Iranians, and the Iranians have every right to put that into their negotiation. The Iranians, to reference Donald Trump, are very, very good negotiators, okay? So the Iranians are like, hey, we're not going to build a nuke, okay? But here's the thing. Those billions of dollars in frozen assets, yeah, the ones that you prevented from going into our bank accounts and that are in multinational banks, yeah, that is owed to us. We deserve that money. This, for some reason, in the greatest example of irony, has pissed off the conservatives, which is amazing to me, because the conservatives are always the ones who are like, what's wrong with making money? What's wrong with making billions of dollars? What's wrong with being rich? Isn't this capitalism? Doesn't this money belong to Iran from business dealings that were done by Iranians? Whatever happened to capitalism? Whatever happened to the open market? Whatever happened to free market? Don't the Iranians deserve money that belongs to them? Money that they earn by their hard work? All of a sudden, they're not for capitalism. All of a sudden, they're not for money that someone has earned rightfully because of their work. Oh no. Let's prevent money.
Assets and the right.
Let's prevent money that belongs to Iranians from going into their bank accounts. And that money, it wasn't like it came from tax revenue paid by the American worker. No, that money was being kept in multinational banks and was being prevented from going into Iran. My God, it's 1979 all over again. Well, I should say 1980s as well. What happened after the Iran, or during the Iran hostage crisis? The U.S. government froze Iranian assets, money that belonged to Iranians that was stored in American bank accounts like Chase Bank, Chase Manhattan Bank. What happened? They didn't allow that money to go back to the Iranians. They froze money that belonged to the royal family, that belonged to the Iranian royal family. And it just so happens that Mr. John Shaheen, who was a powerful individual within American politics and close to people like John J. McCloy, opened up a private bank account with a Hong Kong bank, and it just so happened that a lot of Iranian money ended up in his private account. Oh my God. Okay, let's watch more of this, okay?
To keep its nuclear program than there was for the Munich Agreement. Prior to 1938, Hitler had not publicly proclaimed his aim to annihilate Europe's Jews. Yet Iran has been proclaiming its intention to annihilate the Jewish state for decades.
And yet, the largest community of Jews in the Middle East, outside of Israel, is where? Iran. The Middle Eastern country that has the highest number of Jews living in its society outside of Israel is Iran. Not Saudi Arabia, not Turkey. Iran has the biggest... Well, hold on, I could be wrong about this. I know Turkey has a lot of Jews living in its society, so I could be mistaken on that. But what I do know is that there is actually a population of Jews living in Iran. In fact, and they never talk about this, well, people have talked about this, to be fair, but these types of people, these Prager types, they don't talk about this, but during the Second World War, Iran allowed a lot of Jews who were fleeing the Third Reich to live in its country. In fact, when the Jews got on trains to flee the Third Reich and were heading towards Iran, the Jews who came to Iran, they were welcomed by Iranians. And the Iranians were throwing things at the Jews. They weren't throwing rocks, they were throwing candy as a way to welcome them. In fact, you can go to old Iranian graves, old Iranian graveyards. You will find gravestones with Stars of David on them. Why? Those were Jews who were fleeing the Third Reich that were buried in Iran. They never left Iran. There are many Jews who live in Iran. They're living good lives. Yes, I'm sure. Was there anti-Semitism in Iran? Absolutely. But don't go into this weird road comparing Iran to the Third Reich all of a sudden. If anything, what is going to push for a victory for the hardliners in Iran is the anti-Iranian policies that we are now implementing. Let's listen to more of this stuff.
There were no massive death to America demonstrations in Germany, as there regularly are in Iran.
That may be true, but the fact is there was plenty of anti-American sentiment all over Germany after World War I for obvious reasons. Germany lost the war, and Germany was being imposed with a huge, huge fine in the hundreds of millions of dollars by the West, by the Allies, by the victors of World War I. And there was plenty of anti-Americanism taking place. That's why you had people like Erich Ludendorff walking around and supporting Hitler, and there was all sorts of nationalists walking around in Germany, and they were getting tons of support from the German population. So maybe there weren't any death to America speeches going on in Germany after World War I and before the rise of Hitler, but there was or during the rise of Hitler actually, and not too long after the election victory of Adolf Hitler. But there was plenty of anti-American sentiment in Germany, okay? It's just because the Germans were more deceptive than the Iranians doesn't mean that the Germans are somehow, or the German fanatics less worse than the Iranian fanatics.
In 1938, Germany had not been responsible for terror around the world, as Iran is now.
Hold on.
Nor was Germany responsible for the death of more than 1,000 Americans.
Wait,
as
hold
Iran
on. Oh my God. Okay, hold on a second. Okay. What, Mr. Prager? Are you ignoring a whole chunk of 20th century history? World War I? How many Americans died fighting the Germans in World War I? Okay, hold on, let's look this up, because I don't know the exact number, okay? Hold on. American casualties, World War I. 116,516 deaths. That's a lot of American soldiers dead fighting the Germans. Let's hear that again from Mr. Prager. Hold on. Let's hear this again. I gotta hear this again. Hold on.
1,000 Americans were around the world, as Iran is now. Nor was Germany responsible for the death of more than 1,000 Americans, as Iran has been.
Okay. Over 100,000 Americans were killed by the Germans in World War I. What the hell is this guy talking about? And by the way, German nationalism during World War I was not entirely different from German nationalism during the Second World War. The Germans during the First World War were still filled with racism against Polish people and also Russians. There was racism against Southern Europeans and Eastern Europeans. There was racism against Serbs. There was all sorts of weird eugenic ideas during World War I. German officials would talk about how World War I would be a biological war, a Darwinistic war that would establish who has the superior genes and the superior position in the process of evolutionary, of Darwinian evolution. There was all sorts of weird-ass Darwinistic eugenic ideas during World War I. It's only that during the Second World War, I think that those ideas were amplified and intensified. But nonetheless, it was not really entirely different from German or pan-German ideology during the First World War. What the hell is this guy talking about? Also, this idea of 1,000 Americans being killed by Iran. Now, there could be an argument made for this. I'm not going to entirely reject it. Again, I'm not like this apologist for Iran. I just like to look at the reality of things and not look at things through the lens of hysterical conservatives, or hysterical liberals for that matter. And here's the thing. I actually looked into this, all right? I looked into this. 1,000 Americans have been estimated to be killed by terrorists who were supported by the Iranian government or by weapons given by the Iranian government. Now, that is wrong. If that is true, then yes, that criticism is valid. That remark against Iran is valid. And there should be some sort of compensation made, or some sort of a punishment. I'm not talking war or nukes or anything like that, but some sort of a punishment. But here's the thing: the United States government removed Saddam and enabled Iran to expand in the Middle East, and the United States has been involved in a proxy war with Iran. When you are involved in a proxy war, do not be surprised when the country that you are going to war against in proxy also has a proxy war against you. So this is a part of the proxy war between the Iranians and the Americans. Also, the fact that we cannot ignore is that Israel has also backed Islamic jihadis in Syria. The United States did arms deals with the Iranians in the 1980s. Israel did arms deals with the Iranians in the 1980s. The United States is also backing an Iranian terrorist organization called the Mujahideen of Iran, People's Mujahideen of Iran, or the MEK, which has also been responsible for the deaths of thousands of Iranian civilians. So don't be surprised if Iranians hate Americans to the point that they would support proxies against the Americans. Not saying it's right, but we shouldn't be surprised about it. Another thing also is the fact that the United States has crippled the Iranian economy through sanctions. Sanctioning a country's economy and forcing its currency to free fall in value is an act of economic warfare. So it's not like, the Iranians just woke up and said, yeah, let's just go kill Americans. This is a part of a proxy war. Not saying it's right. It's not right that the Iranians do it. Just like it's not right for the U.S. to back an Iranian terrorist group that is also responsible for the deaths of Iranians and Americans as well. MEK. There's a lot that I have to say about this, and I'm trying to garner as much information in my memory to explain and to describe what I'm saying. It's just crazy to me. Anyway, let's hear more of this stuff. Oh, also, another thing I wanted to mention: the United States has armed many terrorist groups. All right, Islamic terrorist groups, Al Qaeda, the Taliban. They all have their source in American backing in some form or another. So it's not very surprising. And the United States government is not interested in stopping terrorism. All right.
In Iraq, Afghanistan, and Lebanon, the Neville Chamberlains of 2015 defend the agreement with Iran on two grounds: that the only alternative is war, and that this agreement has the capacity to bring Iran into the, quote, community of nations. The war argument is a falsehood for three reasons. First, the alternative to this agreement was continuing and tightening the sanctions.
In other words, Prager wants to see the intensification of sanctions, which is exactly what the Trump administration has been doing after withdrawing from the Iran deal, which is only going to what? Further diminish Iran's economy, and secondly, radicalize Iran. Because and I'm not even talking about just Islam here. Plenty of Iranians have gone into a form of Iranian radicalism, which is really just tribalism and nationalism and racism as well. And people are going to hate the United States, and you are justifying that hatred. That's what you're doing. You're pushing that country further into isolation, and by doing that, you are creating a perfect environment for radicalism.
That were weakening the Iranian regime and greatly diminishing its ability to fund terror groups around the world.
Oh, and here's another thing. Why is it that Iran has now passed the limit of its I think uranium production or enriching uranium? Why has it passed that limit? Why has it passed that limit? Why? After the United States withdrew from the Iran deal, Iran started getting into I don't know the exact words, like uranium production or enriching uranium or something like that. But it's been breaking the rules. Why, after the U.S. withdrew from the Iran deal, that now Iran is doing this? Why? Ask yourself that question. Because the Iran deal was actually working. Iran's like, oh, we want to withdraw from the Iran deal, the one that we agreed to? Oh, so now we're going to start breaking the rules. If you don't believe me, look at what the IAEA was saying. The IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, actually was saying, hey, Iran is actually following the rules. Don't worry, Iran is following the rules. Oh, no, Netanyahu and the rest of his ilk came out and said, oh, no. Oh, no. Iran is doing this secret nuclear production, guys. We have the picture here of the nuclear facility. When did we see this before? When was the last time that we saw this? Oh, I don't know, 2003? The United Nations was doing chemical weapons inspections on Iraq, saying, hey, Saddam Hussein is following the rules, guys, don't worry. What happened? All these Israelis and these neocons were saying, what? Oh, it's a lie. We can't trust the UN. They're lying. They have weapons of mass destruction, and the American people actually fell for this, and there was a war, the consequences of which we are still seeing today. The ripple effects are still reverberating throughout the Middle East because of the lies that we believed in the early 2000s. And we are falling for the same shit again. We're believing the same liars, the same salesmen, the same propagandists. It's happening again. The UN said, Saddam is not doing this. Relax. Saddam's following the rules. Oh, no, Saddam's lying. Iraq war, devastation in the Middle East. The rise of Iran, the rise of Islamism in the Middle East. The rise of Turkey in the Middle East as well, thanks to the Iraq war. The IAEA says, hey, Iran is following the rules. Oh, no. The International Atomic Energy Agency, they're wrong. Iran is lying, guys. We can't trust them. Who's saying these things? The same damn types of people that were saying this back in the early 2000s, and we are believing it. I don't think I've ever talked this fast in a video before. I'm sorry about that. I'll try to talk slower.
Second, because the agreement so strengthens Iran, it makes war far more likely. When evil expansionist regimes get richer, they don't spend their wealth on building new hospitals. They expand. Third,
if they were so interested in war, then why didn't they kill a whole bunch of Americans when they had the chance? They had the chance. They could have killed They could have killed at least one American in those air bases. They didn't do it. Why is it that if they were so interested in war, then why did they just throw out all negotiations? Why didn't they refuse to negotiate? Why did Rouhani say, "Hey guys, don't worry. We can do an Iran deal. We can prevent war with the U.S. and Israel"? Why did Rouhani campaign on that platform? If they were just so interested in war, why did so many Iranians vote for Rouhani when he was actually campaigning against war? So many Iranians voted for this guy because they wanted to get off the sanctions that were imposed thanks to the rhetoric of Ahmadinejad. But even when they voted for a moderate, it still didn't prevent the sanctions. I mean, prevented it for a while under the Honorable Barack Obama, but once the Honorable Barack Obama left, Trump came in and you had all these neocons and these Zionists pushing for aggression against Iran. And guess what? The hardliners in Iran were saying, screw the Iran deal. We're done with the Iran deal. We don't want it. It's gonna only allow more American trickery to seep into our government. Amazingly, the conservatives and people like Prager and the hardliners, the Iranian hardliners, they both have something in common. What is that? What is it, you ask? They both hate the Iran deal. Thanks, Mr. Prager. We are actually doing what you wanted, which is exactly what the hardliners in Iran want, and that is the disintegration of the Iran deal. Congratulations. The American conservatives like John Bolton and Samuel Huntington and the rest of them, they're not so different from the Iranian hardliners. And you've just proved their argument, and that is, we should not have a moderate approach with the Americans. Congratulations, you're now helping to create the environment for a festering Iranian aggressive nationalism.
Iran has been at war with America for decades. And whoever believes that the agreement will bring Iran into the, quote, community of nations betrays a breathtaking ignorance of the Iranian regime.
Why should the Iranians like the Americans when the Americans can't keep a negotiation? Like, if you made a negotiation with someone and that person made concessions, but he also, put his own desires up front, the foundation for any negotiation is what? Both sides have to get something that they want, right? Both sides need to concede. Both sides need to get things that they want. That is the platform for any negotiation. Negotiation is compromise. Make no mistake, okay? If the person feels that he can't get anything in return, guess what happens? He doesn't want to negotiate, and you lose your negotiating power, all right? But let's say you made a negotiation with someone. I don't know. Let's say you said, if you pay for my coffee at Starbucks right now, I'll buy you a $15 gift card from Starbucks. Okay, fine. You buy the guy coffee. He then says, "Hey, I changed my mind." What's that person going to think about you? How's that person going to see you? He's going to say, "Oh, that person's a liar. Can't be trusted. He's a liar. He's a mooch-off." What makes you think that the Iranians should all of a sudden like us after we withdrew from a negotiation that we made with them? One that they made concessions with. I don't know. People think that they're just America's just so innocent. Like, we're just sitting there like, oh, we're just so innocent. We make negotiations and make deals and then pull out of them. How can you expect the Iranian people to trust America when America does that?
The Iranian regime is composed of religious fanatics who are morally indistinguishable.
Really? Really? That's not what I've heard. I've heard, well, yeah, of course there's religious fanatics in Iran, just like there's fanatics in America, right-wing fanatics and left-wing fanatics. There are fanatics in every single country. But let's not forget that there are plenty of people in Iran who don't give a damn about religion. They don't care about Islam. There are plenty of people in Iran who would rather go back to Zoroastrianism, or who are atheists, or who are just really hardcore secular nationalists. Iran is just like any other country. You have your fanatics, religious fanatics, secular fanatics, and then you have people who don't give a damn and they just want to live their lives.
From ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram,
Wait a
and
second.
all...
Another thing that I want to add. MEK, People's Mujahideen of Iran. That is one of our proxy groups that we're using against the Iranian regime. They're also fanatics. And people like John Bolton, Giuliani, and Newt Gingrich love them. So don't give me this crap about, ooh, they're all fanatics and Obama was helping the fanatics.
All the other mass murdering Islamist movements. The Iranian regime has executed more people than any country except China, and killed more than 6,000 Iranians just for being homosexual.
Of course, Dennis Prager would defend homosexuals because, well, Mr. Prager said this. And I put this video up to play this clip. Just listen to this, guys.
The Bible said, men, you are as happy with boys. I don't mean 8-year-olds, 15-year-olds.
Yeah.
Just as a grown man is happy with a 15-year-old girl.
Mm-hmm.
You heard it right there, guys. Rabbi Dennis Prager, he said it right there. You heard it right there. The Bible supports pedophilia. The Bible says very nice things about pederasty. You heard it from your friendly neighborhood rabbi, Dennis Prager. And that's why he just said what he said about Iran. Look how nasty, look how mean they are with gays.
A woman in Iran is not allowed to leave the country without the permission of her husband. The Iranian regime repeatedly calls for the extermination of Israel. No other country in the world is committed to annihilating another country. Iran is already the world's greatest funder of terror organizations.
I had a friend who, I remember one time a couple of years ago, he called me up. I think last year this happened, and he said, you know, Iran is the biggest supporter of terrorism in the world? And I'm like, no, it's not. And he's like, really? Which one is it? I'm like, you're living in it. The United States. The United States is actually more dangerous than Iran for the reason that the United States is way more powerful than Iran. And I've watched enough of this video. It's almost over anyway. We've heard all the talking points. If that is literally the best argument that Prager and his ilk have, then they don't have much of an argument. Because the fact of the matter is, there was a negotiation. The fact of the matter is, Iran conceded and made agreements within the context of that negotiation. The fact of the matter is, the IAEA said Iran was abiding by the rules of the Iran deal. The fact of the matter is, the Iranians were happy making business and doing business. The fact of the matter is, the United States has crippled Iran's economy, and you can't expect people to be happy with you when you are crushing their economy. So, yeah, I don't see how this is even an argument. Anyway, I think you guys heard enough. This video is long enough. You guys just heard some theology. God bless.